Hello, my name is Charlotte Horlick. I'm reader in Korean art history at SOAS in London. My area of specialism include Korean visual and material culture from pre-modern to modern times, on which I have lectured and published widely. Today's lecture is the first of 5 lectures on arts from the end of the Joseon dynasty to the Korean Empire, spanning the late 19th and early 20th century. Visual culture from this period has often been interpreted as representing an intermediary state in the so-called modernization of Korean art. The course aims to provide further insight to understanding the dynamic processes of change during this time. Students will engage with a wide range of material, including paintings, ceramics, and architecture, to investigate the cultural environment of this formative stage in Korean modern history. The first lecture on this course sets the scene for the following lectures, which will focus on visual culture of the Korean Empire. The aim of the lecture is to offer insight into the cultural and philosophical traditions of the Joseon dynasty as a way to enable better understanding of the rapid changes that occurred in society in the closing decades of the 19th century. With this in mind, over the next 5 sessions, I will highlight key characteristics of the cultural and philosophical traditions of the Joseon dynasty. Ruled by a single family over 500 years, the Joseon dynasty was the last kingdom on the Korean peninsula before Korea was colonized by the Japanese Empire. Joseon continues to play a large part in Korean culture today. You may be familiar with key individuals and events from this time, as they have repeatedly featured in popular Korean dramas and films. Many contemporary Korean artists have also drawn inspiration from Joseon artistic practices. Visitors to Korea will also have seen many references to the Joseon dynasty, including in central Seoul, where the palaces and shrines of the Joseon rulers still stand. As I will detail later, Joseon was established on Confucian teaching, and this led to new iconographical traditions and aesthetic practices. The aim of today's session is to offer insight into how royal palaces and other important sites of the Joseon dynasty were built to align with aesthetic, religious, and philosophical concerns of the Joseon ruling elite. In this first session, we will explore how this is manifested in Gyeongbokgung Palace, Jongmyo Shrine, and Sajik Altar, which were all built at the very beginning of the Joseon dynasty. When General Lee Seong-gae, whose portrait you see here, founded the Joseon kingdom and ascended the throne as its first ruler, he instituted a 500-year dynastic rule that was to be the longest lasting in East Asia. So the Joseon dynasty lasted from 1392 until 1910, and thus coincides with the Ming and Qing dynasties in China and the Kamakura, Edo, and Meiji periods in Japan. In this portrait, you see the king seated on a red lacquered throne adorned with designs of leaping dragons. He's wearing a dark blue robe decorated with gold emblems of dragons that symbolize his status as a king. Joseon was established on Confucian principles, and Confucian beliefs and practices therefore permeated all aspects of society during this time. Confucianism is an ancient Chinese belief system established by the philosopher Confucius in the 6th to 5th centuries BCE. It emphasizes the importance of personal ethics, morality, and social harmony. Confucianism was introduced to the Korean peninsula in around the 3rd to 4th centuries CE. In the centuries leading up to the establishment of the Joseon dynasty, Confucianism coexisted with other worldviews that were observed on the peninsula, notably Buddhism and Shamanism. However, Lee Seong-gae put in place Confucianism as state ideology and strongly emphasized Confucian values and ritual practices. As Lee Seong-gae and his successors turned to the teachings of the Confucian sages to effectively model the state and society on Confucianism, they banished Buddhism from public life. Buddhism, therefore, lost its stronghold on the peninsula, though it did not disappear completely. The impact of this on the arts was considerable. In contrast to the lavish artworks that had previously been commissioned for Buddhist worship by previous rulers, the cultural environment in Joseon was shaped by Confucian philosophy, giving rise to new iconographical traditions and aesthetic preferences. The Confucian rulers and their government officials avidly studied the Confucian classics for guidance on how to govern according to the Confucian texts. The teachings of the Neo-Confucian Chinese scholar Zhu Xi became especially influential as they became the foundation for state philosophy and governance. As the Joseon rulers attempted to model themselves on the Confucian sages, they advocated moral development, ethical governance, and the importance of education, among other points. Kaesong, then called Kaegyeong in modern-day North Korea, was the capital of the Goryeo kingdom which preceded the kingdom of Joseon. But Yi Seong-ge, the first king of Joseon, chose Hanyang, present-day Seoul, as the new seat of power and set out to build a city that embodied Confucian teaching. Over the course of the Joseon dynasty, Hanyang became the leading center of Confucian-led rituals and practices, and it also became the home of the Joseon royal family. One of the first projects which Yi Seong-ge initiated was the building of a 19-kilometer stone wall that ran across the 4 mountains which surround the city. Many parts of the city wall are now lit up, and at night it is a spectacular sight. In Joseon times, the wall not only served a practical purpose, it also embodied Confucian teaching. The wall's main gateways were strategically located in each of the 4 cardinal directions, and they were named after the 5 Confucian virtues believed to be the essence of life and the bonds of society. Thus, Hungin Gate in the east symbolized benevolence. The west gate was called Doni Mun, after righteousness. Seungye Mun in the south characterized ritual and propriety, while Sukjeong Gate in the north represented wisdom. The Bushin Bell Pavilion, which was located in the city center, where it functioned as a timekeeping facility, was named after sincerity, Shin. Yi Seong-ge also initiated the building of Gyeongbokgung Palace a few years after he founded the new dynasty. Here, in this 19th century map by Kim Jong-ho, we see the grounds of Gyeongbokgung Palace located in the center of Seoul. Over the next 200 years, the palace became the main residence of the royal family. It was also here where the king conducted his main business, met with his government advisors, and where major rituals and celebrations took place. Location of the main royal palace was symbolically important. Let us return to Kim Jong-ho's map. Backed by Baekak Mountain in the north and flanked by Inwang Mountain to the west and Darak Mountain, it's now called Naksan, Nak Mountain, to the east, the location of the main royal palace was believed to be geomantically auspicious. The Korean term for geomancy is Pungsu Chiri. Pungsu essentially means wind and water. You may be more familiar with the Chinese term Feng Shui. Pungsu is a highly systematized system of the selection of sites such as palaces, tombs, and royal palaces by evaluating the surrounding landscape, taking into account cardinal directions, the presence and absence of wind and water, the location and shapes of mountains surrounding the sites, etc. In the Joseon dynasty, Pungsu was believed to be enormously important. For example, the auspicious location of the royal palace, as determined according to the principles of Pungsu, was believed to strengthen the Joseon royal family and secure a strong and long-lasting rulership of the dynasty. As in the case of all architectural structures within the new capital, The palace took its name after Confucian teaching. Gyeongbok, meaning bright happiness, derived from a poem in the Book of Odes, one of the classics of Confucianism, which included the phrase, "May your bright happiness ever be increased." The main gate leading into the palace compound was called Gwanghwa, meaning radiant transformation. The gate stood as a potent symbol of the king's benevolence and virtue that was believed to emanate from the palace to his subjects. Lee Seong-gae's emphasis on Confucian teachings signaled the significance attached to proprietous ritual behavior called ye in Korean, and the belief that in its cultivation, people would be receptive to order. This too was essential to the creation of Confucian society in harmony with the universe. Ye was propagated through the observance of the 4 family rites according to Confucian teachings, and they were capping, wedding, mourning, and ancestor worship. The Joseon monarch was not only to be a model Confucian who led by example, he was to represent his subjects to the cosmos, ancestral spirits, and other supernatural and spiritual entities. In Hanyang, Lee Seong-gae therefore also constructed Jongmyo Shrine and Sajik Altar, where the most important Confucian state rites were held. Their locations to the east and west of the main palace were based on the belief that the spirits would take up positions on either side of the royal residence and protect the king within. Jongmyo Shrine was where the spirit tablets of deceased Joseon kings and queens were enshrined and rituals for royal ancestors were held. It embodied Confucian teaching through the king's exemplar and was believed to strengthen the ruler's authority and the foundations of the dynasty. Sajik Altar, of which today sadly only the stone foundations have remained, was a sacred site where rituals for the worship of the god of land, Sa, and the god of grain, Jik, were held to pray for the safety and prosperity of the kingdom. Services were performed here in the winter solstice and New Year's Eve, February and August. Rituals and prayers for rain, to have great harvest, and for success in great national affairs were also held here. Since Jongmyo Shrine symbolized the ancestors of past rulers and Sajik Altar the habitat and food of present generations, the 2 sites represented the kingdom, its past legacy, and its future successors. To conclude, it's evident that from the outset, Confucianism played a huge role in the Joseon dynasty, as reflected in Lee Seong-gae's keenness to build a capital that embodied Confucian teachings through the locations and naming of key royal sites. In the next session, we will explore how this was manifested in the arts. In particular, we will explore the production and use of white porcelain wares, which have now come to be synonymous with Joseon ideals and practices.